Hi, my name is John Dunning, and this is my screencast for Databases System 1. So, when talking about my project and my contributions towards the project, I was the I came up with the main idea for the project itself. I came up with that we should use buses for our timetable or for our database, and because it's a rather simple but realistic source of data that we can actually take from, because there's a lot of data that we can actually take and observe from real life examples. So, we decided to make a bus timetable database. So this database would allow people to look up when certain buses from different companies might be running through different stops. So if a bus from Bus Éireann was going from Dundalk to Drogheda, it would allow a person to look up a query and see how many seats might be available still in that bus when it arrives at their stop, or if what time would those buses be leaving at. And that's is kind of important when it comes to how realistic our database actually is. I came up with most of the SQL data. So I found out what buses were going where they were going, what company they drove for, what their ID numbers were, and I found out most of that data. I also came up with the SQL code to make the tables and to ensure that the tables were connected properly and that the foreign keys were implemented properly into the tables. So, for example, I made the code for the driver table, the timetable table, the company table, the bus table, driver table, and the route table, and each of those had to be individually made in order, or else the foreign keys actually would not apply properly. And that was a problem that we ran into at the beginning of our project, is that we were trying to create all the tables at once, so that kind of caused our foreign keys not to work as according to plan. But then we kind of stepped back, reevaluated everything, and then decided to do it at one at a time. So we started with the driver table, then we made the driver ID a foreign key in the bus table, and then we started just doing more and more of that by individually making our tables, and that allowed our foreign keys to actually work more smoothly and to move along the process a lot easier. I also came up with the data that was stored within these tables. So, like the bus ID, the driver IDs, the names, the routes, where they would stop, when they were taken off from, what companies they drove for, um, and stuff like that. That was my main responsibility, was just to create the uh, ERD, make sure that the tables were connecting properly, that the foreign keys were supposed to be where they're supposed to be, that they were linking properly to other tables, so that the driver ID, like the driver table, was connecting to the bus table correctly from the driver ID as the foreign key. And that was my main responsibility, was to create the ERD, make sure that the data in the tables was correct, and then also making the fields within the tables so that they would make realistic sense and that they would be useful for queries. And then when it comes to certain queries, so uh, I also again made all the data for the tables. So I inputted all the data, I made all the data, and I put that down and wrote that down into Notepad++. I was also responsible for coming up with a small amount of the actual sample queries. Um, I did not play a big part in this, but that was because mainly I played a large part in creating the table, finding the data for the tables, and making the diagram make sense. Jamie, of course, drew the diagram, but I was the one who kind of made sure that they were connecting where they were supposed to connecting, and making sure that our table wasn't looping. That was also a big problem that we had at the beginning, was that some of our diagrams were looping on to each other again and again and again. So you would have bus drive, or we'd have driver, bus, route, driver, and that would just cause it to loop and loop and loop. So that was a big problem and caused a lot of errors. Again, simply by stepping back and doing them one at a time, we were able to solve and fix that issue. So yeah, for a lot of the sample queries, I was not a big part of making them. And for the sample data, I was the one who collected a lot of the sample data. Thank you very much for listening to this screencast, and that is all. Thank you so much.